Thank you for joining me. My name's Rebecca and I'm part of the team at Egress. Today I'm interviewing Egress co-founders, CEO Tony Pepper and CTO Neil Larkins, and we'll be discussing starting and scaling a business during a financial recession. Neil, Tony, hi. Before we begin, I thought it'd be quite interesting, as you're both quite different people, for you to describe each other for me. Tony, how would you describe Neil in your own words?
Yeah, sure. So Neil and I are very different people, really, which I think is probably one of the reasons why we work so well together, really. I think Neil looks at things in a very different way. Neil is quite a cautious guy. He's quite a detailed guy. But my personality is one of maybe someone that always wants to kind of take over the world, right? So I think when you blend that together, it works really well. Because we often come at a problem from the completely different direction. But I think the most important thing is that we always found common ground whenever we're making some of the toughest decisions we ever had to make in the business.
Yeah, and Neil, do you agree with that that take on your business relationship?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're certainly very different people, but our core values and goals are absolutely aligned. And I think that's always been the case for the last 20 years we've worked together. I think the one thing that is great for me is that Tony always pushes the boundaries, whereas I would, as Tony says, be rightly overly cautious on some of these things. And I think it's that perfect complement that pushes us to do great things, where we can always have a sensible conversation about what is the best approach. Maybe my overly cautious approach and Tony's let's go and rule the world approach really complements each other very well.
Thinking about kind of how you two, as two opposites, have attracted, how you started Egress back in 2007. Can you talk me through what life was like back then, how the idea for Egress came about?
So I think it's fair to say that Tony and I have worked together for many years in a previous business, and on selling that business, I maybe wasn't so keen to start in a new environment at that time. Tony, in his unique way, managed to persuade me that starting a new business in 2007 was a great idea. I think what we didn't realise back then was that not more than a year into the business, we obviously hit a fairly significant global downturn, and that I'm sure we're going to talk about in more detail. Had some fairly significant problems that we had to contend with.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Neil. That is something that we do want to dig a little deeper into. So you founded Egress in 2007, and by 2009 we were in a global economic recession. What impact did that have? How did it change the way you brought your startup to life?
Interestingly, when you start a business, when we did, which is the back end of 2007, so it's really leading into early 2008, everything's a risk at that point. And everything's full of excitement. We had great product ideas. We had a mission that we were all excited to begin. But the reality is, the macroeconomic climate, while obviously it was a real concern for all businesses, one would argue for a startup, it's less of an immediate concern. Look, obviously there's a concern about funding the business and keeping ourselves individually and personally sort of afloat. But the reality is those macroeconomic environmental changes doesn't necessarily impact that as much, really. The facts are, the risks are the same. You don't have product. You don't have a product market fit, one would argue, either. So you're not really selling in to customers and worried about maybe potentially losing customers. And actually, you have a very low cost base because we didn't have offices. We were working out of one of the local coffee shops near Neil's apartment. So, in many respects, a global economic downturn, as odd as this sounds, isn't actually a bad time to start a business. And the reason for that is because lots of businesses that do have commitments to make in terms of employee salary costs and office costs, startups really don't do that. And as a result, innovation is often stifled, where businesses look at preserving cash and making sure that they can get through those difficult times. So actually for us, we were more concerned about can we actually take technology to market that customers want. The only thing I would say, which does make it challenging, is not so much the cost of actually running and starting up a business, it's more the customer appetite to look at new projects. I think that's one of the things you have to be really mindful of. And actually, we find ourselves in exactly the situation now, whereby customers are obviously looking at the things that they have to do as opposed to things that maybe they'd like to do. But in many respects, again, if that really allows you to focus the mind and focus on tackling problems that are absolutely essential to business. So in many respects, back in 2008, 2009, it did allow us to make sure that the technology we're bringing to market had to be business critical and really make a difference to customers.
Yeah, absolutely. And Neil, perhaps with your sort of micro detail-oriented hat on, maybe you can talk us through how that helped shape and design the technology, and how it maybe affected the operational side of the business too.
So I think, as Tony mentioned, our goal was to bring something to market that the customers wanted to buy. And I actually think that the financial burdens and constraints that were put on us at that time probably made us more astute in the decisions that we make. It's too easy to build a business now, go and raise tens of millions of pounds, and not think about what you're actually trying to solve. And I think the one thing we learned during that phase was we did have huge cash constraints. We had a finite size of team, but actually our goals were still the same, to build something big and exciting. And we weren't certainly going to let a global economic change actually stop us doing that. That being said, we did have to make some fairly significant personal sacrifices. I think we were fairly bullish in the first year or so, and then we maybe didn't deliver tech as quickly as we should have done. We maybe didn't have the perfect market fit that we needed at that point. And we had to make some big personal sacrifices around our own things. We went on to zero salary for a couple of years. But the one thing that I always maintained was that the rest of the staff needed to know there was a future in this business, that actually we weren't going to suddenly run out of money and stop being able to do it. So we made those personal sacrifices to keep everyone else in a job and to keep the business doing and achieving the things that we needed to do. And that absolutely paid off. I think the loyalty we got from the staff, I think the things that we achieved during that period, while yes, I would look back and think we could have done many things differently, we achieved great things during that economic downturn.
It's interesting actually, Neil, when I hear you talk about those times, they feel like, it is a long time ago, right? Not just feels like a long time ago, it was a long time ago. But actually, I remember when you came to me and gave me that kind of groundbreaking news. I can almost remember where I was sitting when you told me that you felt that, look, things are tough and we haven't turned the corner as quickly as we would like. So we're going to have to make a sacrifice and go on no salary. And I remember thinking at the time, no, that's not necessary. Or even if it is, maybe it's necessary just for a couple of weeks. But you were right. And actually, that sacrifice was so important to get us through that time. And I just wonder how many startup businesses are in exactly that situation now, whereby they're looking at the technology they brought to market. Maybe it's not as advanced as they'd like. And they're actually having to make some really, really big decisions. And I think it's the team that you work with, the belief in your own technology, and more importantly, knowing that there will come a point where things will return, but you've just got to almost live in the moment. And I remember thinking, let's just take this week by week. And as the weeks went on, actually, it suddenly got to 6 months. We didn't know where did that time gone. We suddenly got to a year, and then it got to 2 years. Where had that time gone? But actually, I look back now, and this is where I firmly believe so many businesses are right now. I look back now, and that agility that we showed, that ability to make sacrifices as founders, but not permeate that down to our people, actually has really been the foundation, not just of Egress today, but it also built a culture back in 2008, 2009 of how we would operate with our people and how we would operate as we grew the business. So I reflect back on that time, oddly quite fondly, even though it was the making of the business, and I think the making of both of us really in many respects. But I do believe that many businesses in that moment now have to take 1 week at a time, and you will come out on this side.
one of the important things for our viewers to understand is that you bootstrapped the business yourselves from the ground up. How did that change how you operated at this time?
I think the way we set up Egress in 2007, 2008 is a very different way of setting up a business. And I think the modern day startup is formed in a very, very different way. I think the modern day startup doesn't even consider bootstrapping a business. I think the modern day startup immediately looks for funding, and not just immediately looks for funding, immediately knows that within probably 12 months they'll be raising again, and probably 12 months they'll raise again. In fact, there seems to me like there's a perpetual cycle of raising funds every 6 to 12 months in the modern day startup, and I think it's quite unhealthy. And I think it's unhealthy because it gives you a false sense of security that you've actually got a business that can actually take its way through some of these difficult conditions. Whereas when we started, quite frankly, I think it was more our naivety of having never raised investment. Yes, we'd just come on the back of exiting a business and selling a business, but we'd never raised investment. So as a result, I guess it was what we didn't know that kind of led us to bootstrap it. It was really down to Neil's way of growing a good, solid business, which is you need to ultimately pay for yourself and pay for your staff as quickly as you can, and get that product to market as fast as you can, and then ultimately start to make customer sales, iterate, and then grow. And I think the reality is that just doesn't happen these days. And when I look at, well, what's the difference? I think there's a couple of observations, really. I think the first observation is it took us a lot longer that way. You know, sort of self-heating a business takes longer. And I do think there's an inherent impatience in the market to get to market quick. By the way, that's led by investors too. Investors would love you to, don't wait, get to the market faster, you know, spend on sales and marketing and product innovation and get quicker. I'm not really sure if that is always the case. I think there's definitely an element of speed to market, and of course timing is critical, right? If there is a perfect time, a window of opportunity, I think speed to market is really important. But markets change, you know. So I think that's one observation. It does take longer, but I think the second observation is it makes you grow a very different sort of business. When you're not ultimately spending investor money, when you feel like the well is never going to dry up, I think you take risks, you make decisions, you experiment more in perhaps ways that you wouldn't experiment if actually it was down to, if you ran out of cash, then the business would become insolvent. So I think it does change your behavior. And actually, dare I say, you know, with Neil and I think after we realized we got the business to the point where it had a fabulous core base of customers, it was at that point where we realized, no, we don't want to grow a business in the same way as the old business. We do want to grow much faster. We do want to internationalize much faster. And I think at the right time, I think getting investment is a critical part of that growth. But I think more business would be better off if they actually took the leap and self-funded it for longer. I think it also has fringe benefits, by the way, in terms of board structure, board governance, and actually ultimately maintaining a little bit more control in those early to mid stages. So there is lots of benefits, but you do have to be patient and you have to take just a little bit longer.
No, I think Tony summed up perfectly. I think the one thing we've always done, though, is we've run the business like we would with spending our own money. And I think that's the one thing. Even now we are well funded and we've got many hundreds of staff compared to where we were in the early days. We've taken a very similar approach to running the business. Measured and calculated decisions as what we do. And I think that's one of the greatest things about having a partnership and working with someone like Tony is, you know what, we can have many long discussions about the right ways and the right directions to take the business. And actually, you know, I have so much respect for those people that start a business on their own. It's not something I could do. I think it would be impossible for me to do that because actually, I think those views and decisions, we've disagreed on many things over the last few years, but we've always, without fail, come out with an outcome and an agreed decision because actually one of us will always back down or actually persuade the other one that this is the right way to go. And I think that's been instrumental to our thing. So I would reiterate that, you know, bootstrapping a business is probably not the way that most people do it today. However, I do think for those people thinking of starting a business, and I appreciate this is not easy without some level of funding right at the beginning, you've got to take huge personal sacrifices. But if you can get a business to a certain level before taking any significant funding, you will be in a way better situation going forward. You will understand how to grow a business a lot better than just taking tens of millions of pounds or dollars and doing whatever you think is, taking more of a gamble. So for those people looking to start a business, would we do a lot of things differently? Well, absolutely. Has it been hugely beneficial to the climate we're in now? I mean, we don't know what the future is going to hold with the global pandemic. What we do know at the moment is it hasn't changed our business. We're lucky enough at the moment the business is running as it was, and in fact still continuing to grow like it was. But who knows what is around the corner? And I think the one thing we are confident of is we can weather some fairly significant storms. And actually, it's our strength as a management team that will allow us to do that. But actually, it's our slightly cautious approach to everything we do, and making sure that we have all the facts and figures ahead before we make any really bold and kind of outlandish decisions that may put us in hot water.
Yeah, absolutely. And something that you've mentioned in a couple of answers now, Neil, is around that point of your partnership with Tony. So you've obviously gone to Tony in those early days of the recession and said, we need to go without salary for now, and you've made that sacrifice. Tony, for you, how did being in a partnership with Neil change the way that you reacted to the recession and help you grow as a CEO and as a business leader?
I mean, I think Neil's touched on it. I think I and Neil have most admiration for those single soul founders, really. I think when you're in a partnership, you can celebrate together, you can weather the storms together, you can come at something at very different opinions. Again, I think it's really important in a partnership, not just to have a partnership, but a partnership whereby you both bring two very, very different things to the table. We have very different strengths, Neil and I, and I think we recognise that in each other, really. And I think having that allows you to kind of get through those times. I do feel that without that partnership, without that shoulder to cry on, and celebrate the wins, I just think it's quite isolating, really. So my one piece of advice for those founders that have started a business, either in the last couple of years, or indeed there may be, actually it was even before that, to grow a business, I think you've got to look for that partner. And you know what? We've had so many amazing people join this business over the past 5 to 10 years. I think what's fascinating about it is you don't develop that partnership always necessarily from the beginning, or because someone isn't a founder or an employee that started from the beginning. Doesn't mean you can't foster and create a relationship. I have the most amazing relationship with so many people in our business, almost as co-founders, because we've kind of grown up together to some extent, really. So if you haven't got that, if you haven't chose to start with somebody, then proactively look for that person that is an equal, ultimately. And I think that's the key point. I may be the chief exec of the business, Neil may be the CTO and run product, but it isn't viewed like that in our business. We truly are equals in every respect, really, in our business. And I think that is the foundation to a great partnership and a great successful business.
So this all makes lots of sense about starting a business in a recession, and really thinking about the times that are ahead that we've sort of alluded to in earlier parts of this interview. We're about to potentially enter a recession that will be as bad as the one after World War II. How are you going to go about scaling a business during this time? What are your tactics going to be? And what do you have in your armory from your previous existences that you think will kind of help shore us up in the times ahead?
So I think, the one thing's very clear. We are a scale-up business, and our intention is to still continue the growth curve that we were on. Will that be slowed down? Maybe, but actually if we look at the trends and we look at we're lucky enough and fortunate enough to be in a market which is not going to change. I mean, security is going to be as relevant and more relevant than ever. I think the secret now with any business is to make sure that you have perfect product market fit, that you are continually scaling and actually delivering technology that is right for customers. I mean, the one thing that will change in a recession is customers will not keep technologies that are not providing real value into their business. So when I look at the business that we have today, we have to make sure that everything that we are doing is relevant. And I think that the big change in a recession is that you have to be a lot more calculated in everything that you do. Every decision you make for the product, every decision you make in terms of financial outlay, whether it's in sales, marketing, or other areas of the business, have got to be, to the best of your abilities, the right decisions. And actually, while it's very cliche, the phrase "fail fast" is never more important in this kind of technology, and actually this space. So as we go into the next few years, we will be ensuring that everything that we do follows the same goals that we've ever done. When we were struggling as an early startup business, a lot of those skills that we developed, a lot of those challenges that we faced, we have to apply everything and the lessons that we learn into doing this. So we will be very much more focused on every decision that we make. And again, having a strong management team, having unbelievable employees that understand. And I think the one thing that we've done is everyone is coming on this journey with us. We run very important communications out to the business so that actually the business understands the decisions we make and why we are making those decisions. You can't expect a large company like Egress now to come on this journey without understanding why we're making the decisions. So that's the one thing I'll be taking forward is continuing regular weekly updates to the entire business to ensure that everyone understands the decisions that we make and the journey that we're on.
I'd agree with that, Neil. And I think I was just thinking myself, what are those things heading into this economic climate of such uncertainty? I think the only thing that we're all fairly certain is that it is going to be tough. How tough? I don't think anyone can really tell us that right now. But I think you're right. I think focus is going to be key for every business, right? And that's on so many levels. That's a very focused message about the problems you're solving. I think that's a real focus with your development team about the functionality you're going to build and how that aligns to solving customer problems. So I think focus is absolutely key. But I also think efficiency. I look at all the things we've done in the last, let's say, 10 to 12 weeks, and it's allowed us to look at the business we are today. And you look around and think, actually, there's probably a little bit of waste here, that actually maybe we are experimenting too much in certain areas that we could perhaps change. And I think efficiency in sales, I think efficiency in marketing is absolutely critical, not just entering this particular period in time, but I think indefinitely. I think, we all talk about the new normal. So many businesses should come out of this stronger. If you are focused in the right areas and you're looking at, how can we connect with customers now? How can we make sure that we preserve our relationship with our existing customers now? And especially in the current climate where you can't do that physically, there are so many efficiency gains through digital communication that every business should be examining really closely right now. Our business is taking a digital first approach to absolutely everything we do. And I think as a result, we will come out better, we'll come out stronger. So I think that efficiency and that focus is key. But I think the final point, again, Neil's touched on it perfectly. I think it's being sensitive to the environment we're in. And we can't always be together like we were in the old world. So I think it's being, it's making sure that we communicate our plans and actually we make sure that everyone who's in the business is kind of looked after. There's lots of people in lots of roles right now that are operating in very new circumstances, either working at home where childcare's hard, or working in flat chairs where focus is difficult. And I think we've got to help our people get through that. So I think ultimately our culture and the values of the business will become more important than ever. And I think we're going to build more loyalty across the business than we've ever had, because our people realize that we are in this for the long term. And actually, People realise that. And we've got to do everything we can to support our people, to support our customers, but in an efficient way that allows us to continue to grow in the way that we have for the past 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And I really appreciate you taking the time to so candidly share your story with me and with our viewers today. So just to round us off, I'm wondering if you have any sort of tips or key advice that you'd like to give any of our viewers who may be in a similar position with their own startup or scale up.
From my perspective, I think it's, don't ever give up on when times get hard. It would be very easy just to throw the towel in and think, actually, we don't have a market here, or actually we've made mistakes. But I think actually, the natural people who start businesses probably have that resilience and tenacity that's going to get them through this. As I say, I've reiterated this time and time again. You can never understand what curveballs are going to be thrown at you, and I think you've just got to have enough leeway in everything you do to be able to survive those unexpected events. And that's across every part of the business. It's about the way you deliver technology. It's the way you go to market. It's the way you market yourself as well. And I think be cognizant to the be able to be adaptive and change direction as quickly as you possibly can. And again, there will be lots of casualties during this period, I'm sure, but we don't know what the future holds. Let's be clear here. At Egress, we're just doing what we know and what feels right to us, and we are assessing it on a weekly basis. We're understanding what the markets are doing, and we're making sure that we are safeguarding all of the employees that have committed to us, and that's our commitment back to the business, that we will look after and preserve their careers and their opportunities going forward.
I'd agree with that, Neil. And actually, I suppose the advice I would give is the same advice that Neil gave me and the wider leadership team, which is we have to make decisions early. And sometimes the tough decisions, right? And actually, just like in 2008, 2009, they were slightly tougher decisions, arguably, than we had to make 12 weeks ago. But make the tough decisions early. But also, and again, this is a Neil mantra, plan ahead. Plan for the worst. Scenario plan for a worst case outcome that's going to give you 12 to 18 months runway. Really think ahead. And I think the reality is, if you believe that on a week by week basis that you're really going to come out with this next week, or maybe it's next week, or maybe it's the week after, that's going to be quite psychologically hard. Really get into the groove and start thinking, this could take 12 months. This could take 18 months. So plan a little bit longer term about how you're going to get through this. And again, that'll help you make those tough decisions early. So you get that. I think that's absolutely critical. But I think the other point is your product market fit, your underlying technology, the service that you're delivering, it has to be absolutely mission critical for customers. So take that, engage with customers, speak to customers. If you want the answers to all the problems that you're facing in terms of how do we grow this business and take it to market, the answer's sitting with your customers. What are the things that's concerning them, and how can you meet those requirements? I think if you can keep so close to any customers that you have, that is absolutely critical. And then the final point for me, you've just got to hang on. You've just got to believe. And I think you've got to remain as upbeat as you can. And if you're a leader in a business, if you're a founder in a business, that's tough. You have to keep a brave face. Your employees are looking to you for strength, or your leadership team for strength. You have to remain strong at all times. And that's hard. That's really hard. But ultimately, you will get through this. You'll come out the other side, and you will look back and reflect that not only the business is in a much better position, but you personally are in a much better position. So just hang on tight, believe, and plan carefully for the time ahead.
Brilliant, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that advice, and thank you both for your time today. For our viewers, if you'd like to find out more about Egress, our products, or our people, you can do so online at egress.com.